The transport ship broke through the final layer of the station's docking field, and Captain Jake Morrison felt his stomach settle as artificial gravity took hold. He stood near the viewport, watching the massive structure of Zenith Prime grow larger with each passing second. The space station was unlike anything humanity had ever built. It stretched for miles in every direction, a combination of metal, crystal, and materials he couldn't even identify. "First time seeing it never gets old," Commander Lisa Hayes said from beside him. She had been on 2 previous missions to the station, back when Earth was still trying to prove it deserved a seat at the galactic table. Jake nodded but didn't take his eyes off the view. "How many species did you say would be there?" 12 confirmed. "Maybe more, if some of the smaller delegations show up." Lisa checked her datapad. "The Velenith Empire is sending their crown princess." "That's a big deal. They usually send advisors to these things." "A princess." Jake adjusted the collar of his dress uniform. It felt too tight, too formal. He was used to combat gear, not the decorated jacket he wore now. "Don't stare at her markings. They glow based on her emotions, and it's considered rude to watch too closely. Also, the Velenith are telepathic, so keep your thoughts professional." Jake raised an eyebrow. "They can read my mind?" "Surface thoughts only, and only if you're not careful. Just stay focused on the mission." Lisa smiled slightly. "You'll be fine. You've faced worse than a diplomatic ceremony." The ship shuddered as it locked into the docking port. Around them, the rest of the security team began their final preparations. There were 20 soldiers in total, all handpicked for their discipline and ability to stay calm under pressure. Ambassador Chris Palmer had made it clear that this meeting would determine Earth's future in the Galactic Coalition. One mistake could cost humanity everything. Jake gathered his team near the airlock. "Listen up. We're here to provide security for Ambassador Palmer and show the aliens that humans can be trusted. That means military precision, but also restraint. We don't know what we're walking into. So stay alert and keep your weapons on safe, unless I give the order otherwise." The soldiers nodded. They were good people. Jake knew. Veterans of the Mars Rebellion, every one of them. They had seen combat, understood discipline, and knew how to adapt to impossible situations. The airlock opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The corridor beyond was enormous, easily 50 feet high and wide enough for 3 transport vehicles to drive side by side. The walls seemed to pulse with soft light, and the air smelled strange, like ozone mixed with something sweet. Ambassador Palmer led the way, flanked by his aides. Jake and Lisa followed close behind, with the rest of the security team in a protective formation. They passed other aliens in the corridors, beings that looked nothing like humans. Some had multiple limbs, others floated without touching the ground. A few turned to watch the humans pass, their expressions unreadable. "Try not to look like you're cataloging threats," Lisa whispered. "Can't help it," Jake replied quietly. "It's what I do." They reached a massive set of doors, easily 100 feet tall. Intricate patterns covered the surface, glowing with the same soft light as the walls. 2 alien guards stood on either side, their bodies covered in what looked like living armor that shifted and moved. Ambassador Palmer turned to face the human delegation. "Remember, we're representing all of humanity today. Make us proud." The doors began to open, moving slowly and silently despite their enormous size. Light spilled out from the chamber beyond, bright and warm. Jake heard music, though it sounded nothing like human compositions. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, a harmony of sounds that made his chest vibrate. The grand hall was breathtaking. The ceiling stretched so high that Jake couldn't see the top, lost in a galaxy of floating lights that moved in patterns he couldn't predict. The floor was made of something transparent, and beneath it swirled colors that seemed alive. Hundreds of aliens filled the space, arranged in groups by species. Each delegation had its own area, marked by floating symbols that Jake assumed were their flags or crests. Jake forced himself to focus on the task at hand. He scanned the room, noting exits, elevated positions, and potential threats. His team moved with him, taking up positions that would allow them to respond quickly to any danger while still maintaining the appearance of a ceremonial guard. "The Velenith delegation is at the far end," Lisa said quietly, using her datapad to identify the different groups. "The princess should be arriving any moment." Jake looked toward the area Lisa indicated and felt his breath catch. A group of aliens stood there, tall and elegant, their skin seeming to shimmer with an inner light. They wore robes that flowed like water, and each one had patterns of light moving across their skin in hypnotic waves. A disturbance near one of the side entrances drew his attention. The music changed, becoming more formal, more structured. The conversations around the hall died down as everyone turned to look. She entered through a doorway that seemed to form just for her passage. Princess Lyra of the Velenith Empire was tall, nearly 7 feet, with skin that looked like pale silver. Patterns of light moved across her face and arms, shifting between soft blue and green. Her eyes were large and dark, like pools of deep water, and when she moved it was with a grace that made it seem like she was floating rather than walking. Jake found himself staring despite Lisa's earlier warning. There was something about her that demanded attention, though he couldn't explain exactly what it was. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, with confidence but also curiosity, as if she found everything around her fascinating. The princess was surrounded by her own guards, but she seemed barely aware of them. Her gaze swept across the grand hall, taking in each delegation with obvious interest. When her eyes moved toward the human section, Jake straightened instinctively. Ambassador Palmer stepped forward, preparing to cross the hall for the formal introductions. Jake moved with him, leading his team in a precise formation that had been practiced 100 times on the journey to Zenith Prime. The moment Jake's boot touched the crystal floor of the grand hall proper, the moment he crossed from the entrance into the main chamber, Princess Lyra's markings flared bright. The soft blue and green shifted instantly to a vibrant violet that lit up her entire body like a beacon. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Even the music seemed to falter for a moment. Jake kept walking, confused by the reaction but maintaining his professional composure. He had no idea what the color change meant, but from the shocked expressions on the faces of the other Velenith delegates, it was clearly significant. Princess Lyra stood frozen, her dark eyes locked on Jake. The violet light, pulsing across her skin, grew brighter with each passing second. One of her advisors, a stern-looking male with silver robes, leaned close and whispered something urgent, but she didn't seem to hear him. Lisa touched Jake's arm lightly. "I think you just made an impression." "What does violet mean?" Jake asked quietly, still walking forward with his team. "I have no idea. It's not in any of the briefing materials." Ambassador Palmer had noticed the commotion as well. He continued toward the center of the hall where the formal greetings would take place, but Jake could see the tension in his shoulders. This wasn't part of the plan. Jake reached his designated position, his team spreading out in a protective but non-threatening formation around the ambassador. Across the hall, Princess Lyra finally seemed to break from her trance. She spoke quickly to her advisor, her hands moving in gestures that looked both excited and frustrated. The ceremony began, but Jake barely heard the speeches and formal declarations. He could feel eyes on him from across the hall. Every time he glanced toward the Velenith delegation, he found Princess Lyra watching him, her markings still glowing that impossible violet. Whatever had just happened, Jake knew it was going to complicate everything. The opening ceremony lasted 3 hours. Jake stood at attention the entire time, his mind wandering despite his best efforts to stay focused. Every delegation gave a speech about unity and cooperation. The translations came through a small device in his ear, turning alien languages into English that sometimes made sense and sometimes didn't. When it finally ended, Ambassador Palmer looked exhausted. "Captain Morrison, a word, please." Jake followed the ambassador to a quiet corner of the hall. The crowds were breaking up, different species mingling or returning to their quarters. Lisa took over, supervising the security team. We have a situation, Palmer said, keeping his voice low. The Velenith delegation has requested that you serve as their liaison during the evaluation period. Me specifically? Jake frowned. Why? They didn't say. But Princess Lyra made the request personally, and refusing would be seen as an insult. Palmer rubbed his temples. I need you to accept. The Velenith Empire has more influence in the coalition than any 3 other species combined. If we upset them, Earth's membership is finished before it starts. What exactly would I be doing? Showing them around the human sections of the station. Answering questions about our culture. Being a representative of humanity. Palmer met Jake's eyes. Can you handle it? Jake thought about the princess's violet markings and the way she had stared at him. I'll do my best. That's all I ask. Report to their diplomatic suite in 1 hour. The Velenith quarters were on the upper levels of Zenith Prime, in a section where the station's architecture became more organic, less metallic. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in a rhythm that reminded Jake of a heartbeat. The lighting was softer here, coming from bioluminescent plants that grew from ceiling fixtures. A guard met Jake at the entrance, a tall Velenith male whose markings stayed a steady blue. Captain Morrison, the princess is expecting you. He was led through several chambers, each more elaborate than the last. Finally, they reached a room that looked out over the stars. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the vastness of space, and Princess Lyra stood before them, her back to the door. You may leave us, she said without turning. Her voice was musical, each word carrying multiple tones that the translator in Jake's ear struggled to convey properly. The guard hesitated. Your Highness, protocol requires. I said leave. This time there was steel in her voice. The guard bowed and departed. Jake stood near the doorway, unsure of what to do. In all his years of military service, he had never been alone with royalty. Human or otherwise. Princess Lyra turned to face him. Her markings had returned to a soft green, though hints of violet flickered across her shoulders. Up close, Jake could see that she was even more striking than he had realized. Her features were similar enough to human that he could read expressions, but different enough that he felt like he was looking at a work of art rather than a person. Captain Jake Morrison, she said, and hearing his name in her voice made something in his chest tighten. Do you know why I requested you? No, Your Highness. Please, call me Lyra. We will be spending much time together this week. Formality becomes tiresome. She moved closer, studying him with those dark eyes. When you entered the grand hall, I felt something I have never felt before. A recognition. A connection. My people believe such things are omens, signs from the universe that 2 souls are meant to meet. Jake kept his expression neutral, though his mind was racing. I'm just a soldier, Your Highness. Lyra, I'm not anyone special. You are wrong. She reached out as if to touch his face, then stopped herself. I have lived for 97 of your years. I have met thousands of beings, from hundreds of worlds. Never has my essence responded as it did to you. The violet light. It means profound recognition. It is so rare that most Velenith go their entire lives without experiencing it. I don't understand. Neither do I. That is why I must learn about you. About your people. Will you help me understand? Jake thought about refusing. About the complications this could cause. But he had his orders. What do you want to know? Repperly. With though. What do you want to know? Over the next hour, Lyra asked him questions about everything. About Earth. About human history. About his own life. Jake found himself talking more than he usually did. Telling her about growing up in Colorado. About joining the military. About the battles on Mars that had earned him his scars and his rank. Lyra listened to everything with complete focus, her markings shifting through various shades of blue and green. Sometimes violet would flash across her skin when he said something that particularly interested her. Your lives are so short, she said finally. Yet you pack so much into them. You fight. You love. You create. all with the knowledge that you will die within a century. Does this not make you afraid? Sometimes, Jake admitted. But it also makes life feel more valuable. Every day matters. Because we don't have forever. We Velenith live for thousands of years. We have time for everything, so we rush nothing. But perhaps we lose something in all that time. Perhaps we forget to truly live. Her markings pulsed violet again. You make me want to understand that urgency, that passion. A chime sounded, indicating someone was at the entrance. The stern advisor from earlier entered without waiting for permission. His markings were a dark red, which Jake's briefing materials had said indicated anger or disapproval. Your Highness, this is highly inappropriate. You cannot be alone with an alien, especially one from such a primitive species. High Commander Zeth, Lyra said coldly. Captain Morrison is our guest. You will treat him with respect. Add it, Lyra Seth. Add it, Lyra Seth. Lyra Seth. I will treat him as protocol demands, nothing more. Zeeth turned to Jake. You are dismissed, human. The princess has other obligations. Jake looked at Lyra, who gave a small nod. He bowed slightly, the way Lisa had taught him, and left the room. Behind him, he could hear Lyra and Zeth beginning to argue in their own language, the translator unable to keep up with their rapid speech. The next 3 days followed a similar pattern. Jake would arrive at the Velenith quarters, and Lyra would insist on touring different parts of the station with him. She wanted to see everything related to humans. The observation deck where off-duty crew gathered to watch the stars. The small garden section where earth plants grew under artificial sunlight. The recreation areas where soldiers played games and shared stories. Lyra was fascinated by all of it. She asked endless questions, trying to understand human behavior and culture. Jake found himself enjoying their time together more than he wanted to admit. She was intelligent and curious, and when she laughed at his attempts to explain human humor, the sound was like music. Lisa noticed, of course. You're getting attached, she said one evening when they were reviewing security reports. I'm doing my job. Your job is to be a liaison, not to fall for an alien princess. Lisa's expression softened. Jake, I've known you for 5 years. You're a good man, but this can't go anywhere. You know that, right? I know. Jake rubbed his face. I'm not falling for anyone. I'm just trying to help her understand humans. Keep telling yourself that. On the 4th day, Ambassador Palmer announced that there would be a demonstration. Each species would show the coalition their capabilities, military and otherwise. It was meant to prove that Earth deserved membership, that humans could contribute something valuable to the galactic community. Jake's team was scheduled to run a combat simulation, showing human tactical abilities. They spent hours preparing, checking equipment, and reviewing the scenario. It was a hostage rescue situation, designed to be nearly impossible. The idea was to show human creativity and adaptability under pressure. When the demonstration began, hundreds of aliens filled the observation areas around the simulation arena. Jake could see Lyra sitting in the royal box, her markings bright with what he hoped was excitement rather than concern. The simulation started. Jake led his team through the scenario, calling out orders and adjusting their tactics on the fly. The enemy forces were holographic, but responded with realistic AI, and the hostages would die if they made mistakes. Everything was going according to plan until it wasn't. A power surge ripped through the arena, causing the holographic projectors to malfunction. Instead of shutting down safely, they began overloading, sending electrical discharges across the floor and walls. Everyone out, Jake shouted. His team scrambled toward the exits, but the malfunctions had locked several doors. Then Jake saw it. A massive surge building near the observation area, right below where Lyra sat. The aliens were evacuating, but slowly. Too slowly. If that surge released, it would tear through the shields protecting the audience. Jake didn't think. He ran toward the observation area, grabbing a metal support beam that had fallen from the damaged ceiling. He wedged it into the power conduit feeding the surge, creating a path for the energy to ground through the station's safety systems instead of exploding outward. The discharge threw him backward. His body slammed into a wall, and pain exploded through his shoulder and ribs. Through blurred vision, he saw the observation area was safe. The shields had held. Lyra was safe. Then everything went black. He woke up in the medical bay, his body aching but whole. The first thing he saw was Lyra's face, her markings glowing a worried yellow-green as she leaned over him. "You're awake," she said softly. "Thank the ancestors. I thought I had lost you. The others?" Jake managed to ask. "Everyone is safe. Because of you." Her hand touched his, and he felt warmth spread through his arm. "Why did you risk yourself? Your shields were not active. You could have died. You were in danger." The words came out before Jake could stop them. "I couldn't let anything happen to you." Lyra's markings shifted to violet, so bright that the room seemed to glow with it. "You protected me, without thought for yourself, without calculation or politics. You simply acted, because you cared." "Yes," Jake admitted, too tired to hide the truth. "This changes everything," Lyra whispered, her hand still in his. Jake spent 2 days recovering in the medical bay. The alien doctors had technology that made human medicine look primitive, but they still insisted he rest. Lyra visited him every day, often staying for hours. They talked about everything and nothing. And Jake found himself looking forward to her visits more than he wanted to admit. On the 3rd day, Lisa came with news. "The coalition is voting tomorrow on Earth's membership. Ambassador Palmer thinks we have the votes, especially after what you did during the demonstration. Half the delegates are calling you a hero. I just did what anyone would do. That's the point. You showed human instinct, human values. The other species are starting to understand what makes us different." Lisa paused. "But there's something else. The Velenith delegation has been making noise about Princess Lyra spending so much time with you. It's becoming a political issue." Jake sat up carefully, his ribs still sore. "What kind of issue?" "The kind that could affect the vote. Some delegates think Lyra's interest in you is inappropriate. Others think it's proof that humans are manipulating the coalition. Ambassador Palmer wants you to keep your distance until after the vote." Before Jake could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The lights flickered, and somewhere distant, he heard the sound of explosions. Lisa was already moving, pulling her sidearm from its holster. "Stay here. Not a chance." Jake grabbed his uniform jacket and followed her into the corridor. The station was in chaos. Aliens ran in every direction, some screaming in languages the translators couldn't keep up with. Smoke billowed from ventilation shafts, and the smell of burning metal filled the air. A coalition security officer rushed past, his face twisted with panic. Jake grabbed his arm. "What's happening?" "Attack, bombs, multiple locations." The officer pulled free and kept running. Jake's military training kicked in. He assessed the situation quickly. Multiple explosions meant multiple attackers, probably coordinated. This wasn't random. This was planned. "The delegates," Jake said. "They'll be targets." "Where's the main assembly?" "Ah." Lisa checked her datapad. "Level 7. Conference Hall Alpha." "But Jake, we need to secure our own people first. Ambassador Palmer can handle himself. Princess Lyra can't." Jake was already moving, ignoring the pain in his ribs. "Come on." They fought through the crowds, moving against the tide of evacuating aliens. More explosions rocked the station, closer this time. Jake saw bodies, both alien and human, lying motionless in the corridors. Whoever was doing this didn't care about casualties. The route to the Velenith quarters was blocked by a collapsed ceiling. Jake cursed and pulled up a mental map of the station. "There's a service corridor 2 levels down. It connects to the diplomatic wing. That'll take us through the damaged sections. It's the only way." They found an emergency shaft and climbed down. The service corridors were narrow and dark, lit only by failing emergency lights. Water or some other liquid dripped from broken pipes, and the air was thick with smoke. Jake heard voices ahead. He signaled Lisa to stop, and they crept forward quietly. Around a corner, 3 figures in environmental suits were planting another explosive device. The suits were generic, impossible to trace to any specific species. "We need to stop them," Lisa whispered. Jake nodded. They had surprise on their side, but no weapons. The attackers would likely be armed. He grabbed a piece of broken pipe from the floor and moved forward silently. The fight was brutal and quick. Jake took down the first attacker with the pipe before they could react. Lisa tackled the second, using her combat training to pin them against the wall. The third attacker reached for a weapon, but Jake was faster, driving his fist into their helmet hard enough to crack the visor. "Secure them," Jake ordered, already moving toward the explosive device. It was counting down. 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. He didn't know alien technology well enough to disarm it safely, so he did the next best thing. He ripped the device free from the wall and carried it back to the emergency shaft, throwing it as far down as he could. The explosion came 15 seconds later, shaking the corridor but contained to the lower levels. "We need to move," Lisa said. "If there are more of them, they know we're here now." They continued through the service corridors, moving as fast as they dared. Jake's body was screaming in protest, his barely healed injuries making every step agony. But he pushed through it. When they finally reached the diplomatic wing, they found it in shambles. Doors were blown open, furniture was overturned, and scorch marks covered the walls. Jake's heart sank. If Lyra had been here during the attack, if he was too late. "Jake!" Lisa pointed down the corridor. A group of figures in combat armor was dragging someone toward a side exit. Even from this distance, Jake could see the violet glow of Velenith markings. He ran. His ribs felt like they were tearing apart, and his shoulder burned with pain. But he ran anyway. Lisa was right behind him, shouting for backup into her communicator. The attackers saw them coming. 3 turned to engage, while the others continued dragging Lyra toward what looked like an emergency transport. Jake counted 5 in total, all armed with energy weapons that would cut through flesh like paper. The first shots went wide, giving Jake time to duck behind a support column. Lisa returned fire with her sidearm, forcing the attackers to take cover as well. But they were pinned down, outnumbered, and outgunned. "We need a plan," Lisa said. Jake looked around desperately. The corridor was wide, but offered little cover. The support columns were spaced too far apart to advance safely, and with every second that passed, Lyra was being dragged further away. Then he saw the fire suppression system. The pipes ran along the ceiling, old-fashioned water-based rather than the modern force field systems. If he could break one. "Cover me," Jake said. He stepped out from behind the column and fired Lisa's spare weapon at the ceiling pipe. Water exploded downward in a massive spray, filling the corridor with a dense mist that the energy weapons turned to steam. Using the cover, Jake charged forward. He couldn't see clearly, but neither could the attackers. He hit the first one low, taking them to the ground. A blast of energy went over his head, so close he felt the heat. He rolled, came up behind another attacker, and drove his elbow into the gap between their helmet and armor. Lisa was there a second later, firing precisely into the mist. 2 attackers went down. The remaining ones abandoned their attempt to take Lyra and fled toward the emergency transport. Jake let them go. He only cared about getting to Lyra. She was unconscious, slumped against the wall where the attackers had dropped her. Her markings were dim, barely visible, and when Jake touched her skin, it was cold. "Lyra," he said, carefully checking her for injuries. There was a burn mark on her arm and a cut across her forehead, but she was breathing. "Lyra, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then locking onto his face. Her markings suddenly flared bright violet. "Jake, you came." "Jake, Of course I came. He helped her sit up slowly. Are you hurt? I will heal. She touched his face gently. But you should not have risked yourself again. These attackers. They wanted to kill me. To kill the human delegation. To make it look like your people were responsible. What? Lisa stepped closer, her weapon still ready. How do you know? I heard them talking before they attacked. They spoke of destroying the alliance between humans and Velenith. They spoke of keeping the old order, of preventing change. Lyra's markings shifted to red, anger burning across her skin. They are fools. But dangerous fools. Coalition security forces finally arrived, their heavy armor and weapons clearing the corridor. Medical teams followed, immediately moving to treat Lyra. She refused to leave until she saw Jake being treated as well. I will not leave him, she said firmly, when they tried to separate them. He saved my life. I stay where he stays. They ended up in the same medical facility, in adjacent rooms. Through the clear wall between them, Jake could see Lyra being examined by Velenith doctors who had arrived from their ship. High Commander Zeth was there too, his markings blazing red as he argued with someone on a communication device. Ambassador Palmer arrived an hour later, his face grave. Captain Morrison. Thank God you're alive. What's the damage? Jake asked. 7 dead, 23 injured. Could have been much worse if you hadn't stopped those attackers. Palmer sat down heavily. We've identified them. Members of a radical group called the Sovereignty League. They believe humanity is too dangerous to be allowed into the coalition. They tried to frame us by making the attacks look like human aggression. Did they succeed? No. Security footage shows the real attackers. And your actions, saving Princess Lyra and other delegates, has convinced even the skeptical species that humans can be trusted. Palmer smiled slightly. The vote is tomorrow as scheduled. We're going to win, Jake. Earth is going to be part of the galaxy. Jake should have felt happy. But all he felt was tired and worried. Because through the clear wall, he could see Exeth pointing at him while arguing with Lyra, her markings flashing between violet and red. Later that night, when the medical staff had left them to rest, Lyra spoke to him through the wall's communication system. My father has demanded I return home immediately, she said quietly. He says my attachment to you has become a scandal, that it threatens our empire's standing in the coalition. Maybe he's right. Maybe it would be better if we kept our distance. Better for whom? Her markings flared violet. Jake, in all my years, I have never felt what I feel when I am with you. Your people call it love. Yes, this deep connection, this need to be near someone, to protect them, to know them. Jake's throat felt tight. Yes, we call it love. Then I love you, Jake Morrison. And I will not let politics or fear or tradition take this from me. From us, Lyra. I'm just a human. I'll be dead in 60 or 70 years. You'll live for thousands. What kind of future could we possibly have? Lyra, I'll be not pla. One filled with all the urgency and passion you spoke of. One where every day matters because we know it is precious. She pressed her hand against the clear wall. I am tired of living forever without truly living. You make me feel alive. Jake pressed his hand against the wall where hers was, wishing he could touch her for real. Let them come. We will face them together. The coalition vote took place the next morning. Jake watched from the observation gallery as Ambassador Palmer stood before the assembly of alien delegates. Species from across the galaxy listened as Palmer made his final argument for Earth's membership. When the vote was called, the results were overwhelming. 43 in favor, 8 against, 3 abstaining. Earth was officially part of the Galactic Coalition. The human delegation erupted in celebration. Lisa hugged Jake so hard his ribs protested. Other soldiers clapped him on the back, laughing and cheering. They had done it. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, but Jake couldn't fully enjoy the victory. because across the hall, he could see the Velenith delegation, preparing to leave. Lyra stood among them, her markings a dull blue that spoke of sadness. She looked at him once, her dark eyes full of longing, then turned away as Zeth guided her toward the exit. "We need to talk," Ambassador Palmer said, pulling Jake aside. "My office, now." Palmer's temporary office on Zenith Prime was small and functional. He poured himself something that looked like coffee but probably wasn't, then turned to face Jake. "The Velenith Emperor has formally requested that Princess Lyra return home. He considers her attachment to you a threat to their royal bloodline and political stability." "I understand." "Do you? Because this isn't just about two people having feelings for each other. The Velenith Empire is one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. If we upset them, if we're seen as corrupting their princess, it could damage everything we just achieved." Jake clenched his fists. "What do you want me to do? I'm being offered a promotion. A position on Earth, overseeing the integration of coalition technology into our military. I want you to come with me. Leave Zenith Prime. Leave this situation behind before it becomes a bigger problem. You want me to just forget about her. I want you to think about what's best for humanity. Is your personal happiness worth risking Earth's future?" Palmer's expression softened. "I'm not trying to be cruel, Jake. But sometimes being a leader means making hard choices." Jake thought about Lyra, about her violet markings and her laugh, and the way she looked at him like he was the most important thing in the universe. He thought about all the people on Earth who were counting on him to do the right thing. "I need time to think," he said finally. "You have 24 hours. After that, the decision is made for you." Jake left the office feeling like he was carrying the weight of the entire world. He found Lisa on the observation deck, watching ships come and go from the docking ports. "Heard about Palmer's offer," she said without looking at him. "You should take it. You think I should just leave. I think you should be realistic. You and Lyra, it's impossible. Different species, different lifespans, different worlds. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away." "What if I don't want to be brave? What if I just want to be happy?" Lisa finally turned to look at him. "Then you're being selfish. And that's not the Jake Morrison I know." Before Jake could respond, his communicator chimed. A message from Lyra, marked urgent. He opened it and read, "Meet me at the garden section. Please. One last time." The garden section was empty when Jake arrived. The artificial sunlight was dimmed for night cycle, casting long shadows across the earth plants that grew in careful rows. The air smelled of soil and growing things, a reminder of home. Lyra stood among the tomato plants, her markings glowing soft violet in the darkness. She wore simple robes, nothing like the elaborate outfits she usually favored. Somehow, she looked even more beautiful this way. "You came," she said. "You asked." Jake stopped a few feet away, keeping distance between them, even though everything in him wanted to close it. "Lyra, I can't do this." "Do what?" "This. Us. It's too complicated, too dangerous. Ambassador Palmer is right. I need to think about Earth, about my people. And what about your own heart?" Lyra moved closer. "What about what you want? What I want doesn't matter. It matters to me." She was right in front of him now, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "Jake, I have spent my entire life doing what others expected, being the perfect princess, following every rule, putting duty above all else. For 97 years, I lived in a cage made of tradition and obligation. Then you walked into that grand hall, and for the first time, I felt free. I'm not worth losing everything for. You are worth everything." Her hand touched his face, and Jake couldn't pull away. "My people have a tradition. The trial of intent. It is ancient, rarely used, but still honored. If a royal chooses someone outside our species, outside our culture, That person can undergo trials to prove their worthiness. If they succeed, no one can challenge the union. What kind of trials? 3 tests. Of understanding, of endurance, and of sacrifice. They are designed to be nearly impossible. No outsider has ever completed them. Her markings pulsed brighter. But if anyone could, it would be you. And if I fail, then we must part forever. It is the law. Lyra's voice cracked slightly. But at least we will have tried. At least we will know we fought for what we wanted, rather than simply accepting what others decided for us. Jake pulled back, running his hand through his hair. This is crazy. Even if I somehow pass these trials, what then? I'll be dead in 70 years at most. You'll live for thousands. You'll forget me eventually. I will never forget you. And 70 years of truly living is worth more than 1,000 years of merely existing. She took his hands in hers. Jake, you taught me that every moment matters. That urgency and passion make life worth living. Let me have those moments with you, however long they last. And what about your father? Your people? I have already sent a formal request for the trial of intent. My father cannot refuse without dishonoring our oldest traditions. He is angry, but he is also bound by law. Lyra smiled slightly. I have learned some things from watching you. Sometimes, you must fight for what you believe in, even when the odds seem impossible. Jake looked into her eyes and saw everything he wanted. Everything he was afraid to reach for. When would these trials happen? 1 month from now. You would train on the Velenith homeworld. And if I refuse, then I return home, and we never see each other again. My father will arrange a marriage for me with someone appropriate, someone safe, someone I do not love. Her markings dimmed. I will live for thousands of years, Jake. Thousands of years of wondering what might have been. Jake thought about Ambassador Palmer's offer, about returning to Earth, about doing the safe thing, the responsible thing. Then he thought about spending the rest of his life wondering, what if? I'll do it, he said. I'll take your trials. Lyra's markings exploded into brilliant violet, so bright that the entire garden seemed to glow. She threw her arms around him, and Jake held her close, feeling like he was holding the entire universe. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for being brave enough to try. They stayed in the garden until morning, talking about everything and nothing. About the trials, about their fears, about the future they might have together. When the artificial sun began to rise, Lyra reluctantly pulled away. I must return to my ship. We leave today. She touched his face one more time. Train hard, Jake Morrison. These trials will test you in ways you cannot imagine. But I believe in you. I believe in us. Jake watched her leave, his heart feeling both full and terrified. He had faced combat, had stared down death more times than he could count. But nothing had ever scared him as much as what he was about to attempt. Ambassador Palmer was not happy. You're throwing away your career, possibly Earth's reputation, for a relationship that has no realistic future. With respect, sir, you're wrong. This has every realistic future I want. The trials will be broadcast across the Velenith Empire. Billions will watch. If you fail, if you embarrass yourself, it reflects on all of humanity. I guess it. Then I won't fail. Jake met Palmer's eyes. Sir, you asked me to represent humanity. That's what I'm doing. I'm showing them that humans don't give up, that we fight for what we love, that we believe in the impossible. Palmer stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, or the biggest fool. Possibly both. He pulled out a data pad. I'm officially detaching you from diplomatic duty. You'll travel to the Velenith homeworld as a private citizen. Earth cannot be seen as endorsing this, but unofficially. He handed Jake the data pad. These are all the files we have on Velenith, culture, history, and previous trials. Study them. Learn everything you can. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. Thank me if you survive. Lisa helped him pack for the journey. You know this is insane, right? I know. And you're doing it anyway. I'm doing it anyway. Jake looked at his friend. Lisa, have you ever felt like something was worth any risk? Like it didn't matter what happened? You had to try? Once. Long time ago. She smiled sadly. I walked away. Regretted it every day since. She handed him a small case. Communication equipment. Earth compatible. Send updates when you can. Let us know you're alive. Will do. The transport to the Velenith homeworld took 3 days. Jake spent every waking moment studying the files Palmer had given him. He learned about Velenith history, their complex social structures, their philosophy and art. He learned about the previous trials, the few that were recorded. Each one seemed designed to be impossible for anyone not born Velenith. When the ship finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel, Jake got his first look at Lyra's world. It was beautiful, covered in purple oceans and silver continents. Cities glowed across the surface like jewels, and orbital structures ringed the planet in elegant patterns. A delegation met him at the spaceport. Not Lyra, she couldn't be seen with him until after the trials, but others who would guide him to the training facility. They looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and pity. You are brave to attempt this, one of them said. But bravery alone will not be enough. Jake looked out at the alien world and thought about Lyra, about her violet markings and her belief in him. Then I'll find what else I need. The training facility was carved into a mountain overlooking one of the purple oceans. Jake spent 4 weeks there, preparing for the trials. Velenith scholars taught him their language, their customs, their way of thinking. It was harder than any combat training he had ever endured, not because of physical difficulty but because it required him to understand an entirely alien perspective. He slept little, studied constantly, and pushed himself beyond what he thought possible. At night, he would stand on the balcony of his quarters and look up at the stars, wondering if Lyra was looking at the same sky. When the day of the trials finally arrived, Jake was escorted to the capital city. The streets were packed with Velenith citizens, all wanting to see the human who dared attempt their sacred trials. Their markings ranged from curious yellow to skeptical red. The trial arena was massive, capable of holding 100,000 spectators. But it wasn't just the people in the arena who would watch. The trials were being broadcast across the entire Velenith Empire and to the Coalition as well. Billions would see him succeed or fail. Jake stood in the center of the arena, wearing simple clothes that the Velenith had provided. Across from him sat the royal family on an elevated platform. He could see Lyra there, her markings carefully neutral, but her eyes never left him. Beside her sat the Emperor, a massive Velenith male, whose markings were deep gold. His expression was cold and disapproving. High Commander Zeth stepped forward to explain the trials. His voice was amplified across the arena. The trial of intent consists of 3 challenges. The first tests understanding. Can this human truly comprehend our ways, our values, our culture? The second tests endurance. Does he possess the strength to survive what a Velenith must survive? The third tests sacrifice. What is he willing to give up for the one he claims to love? Zeth looked directly at Jake. These trials have broken stronger beings than you, human. You may withdraw now without shame. Zethar, I'm not withdrawing, Jake said clearly. A murmur ran through the crowd. The Emperor's markings flashed red for just a moment. Then let the first trial begin. The arena floor opened, and Jake found himself standing in what looked like a government chamber. Holographic Velenith surrounded him, arguing in their language. The translation in his ear explained the scenario. It was a recreation of a famous moment in Velenith history, a crisis point where the wrong decision had nearly destroyed their civilization. Jake was placed in the role of the leader who had to make that decision. He had to navigate the complex politics, understand the cultural implications, and find a solution that aligned with Velenith values while preventing disaster. He listened carefully to each argument. He thought about everything he had learned over the past month. The Velenith valued harmony over individual gain. They believed in long-term thinking over short-term solutions. They respected wisdom more than strength. For 2 hours, Jake debated with the holographic counselors. He asked questions, considered options, and slowly worked toward a solution. Finally, he made his decision. It wasn't the flashy choice, wasn't the bold military strike that his instincts screamed for. Instead, it was a patient diplomatic solution that would take years to fully implement, but would preserve the social harmony that Velenith culture prized above all else. The simulation ended. The crowd was silent. Jake couldn't read their expressions, couldn't tell if he had succeeded or failed. Then Exeth spoke. The Council of Elders has reviewed your decision. While it differs from the historical choice that was made, they judge that your reasoning demonstrates true understanding of Velenith philosophy. You have passed the first trial. The crowd erupted in surprised chatter. On the royal platform, Lyra's markings flared bright violet before she could control them. The Emperor's expression remained cold. But Jake thought he saw a flicker of respect in those dark eyes. The second trial began immediately. The arena floor shifted again, this time becoming a harsh landscape of sharp rocks and poisonous plants. The air shimmered with heat that made Jake's eyes water. This is a recreation of ancient Velenith, Zeth explained. Before we evolved to our current form, our ancestors had to survive in environments that would kill most species. You must cross this terrain and reach the far side within 4 hours. If you fail, you die. Jake looked at the landscape. It was at least 2 miles of deadly terrain. The temperature had to be over 150 degrees. The sharp rocks would tear through his boots, and the plants released spores that he could see floating in the air like poisonous clouds. He couldn't do this the Velenith way. Their biology was different. Their bodies adapted to survive these conditions. But he could do it the human way. Jake tore strips from his shirt and wrapped them around his hands and feet for protection. He studied the terrain, looking for patterns in the rock formations and gaps in the poison spore clouds. Then he began to move, using every bit of training and instinct he possessed. The heat was overwhelming. Within minutes, Jake was drenched in sweat. The wrapped cloth around his feet helped, but he could still feel rocks cutting through. The poison spores made him dizzy when he couldn't avoid them. But he pushed through, focusing on the next step and then the next. He fell twice, cutting his hands on the sharp rocks. The second time, he lay there for a moment, wondering if he could get up. His body was screaming, his vision was blurry, and he could hear voices in the crowd shouting that the human was finished. Then he thought of Lyra, of her belief in him, of the future they could have together. Jake got up. He made it across the deadly landscape in 3 hours and 47 minutes. When he stepped onto the safe platform at the far side, he collapsed. Medical personnel rushed forward, treating his cuts and giving him water. Through blurred vision, he saw Lyra standing on the royal platform, her hands pressed to her mouth and her markings blazing violet. The crowd was chanting something in Velenith. Jake's translator turned it into warrior spirit, human heart. When Jake could stand again, Zeth approached. You have passed the second trial. No outsider has ever done so before. For the first time, there was something like respect in the commander's voice. Rest now. The final trial will take place tomorrow. That night, Jake lay in the medical facility, his body aching but his spirit strong. A message came through on his communicator. It was from Lisa. Back on Zenith Prime, the whole galaxy is watching you. You're making humanity look good. Keep going. The third trial was different. There was no arena, no simulation. Instead, Jake was brought to a private chamber where only the royal family, the Council of Elders, and Zeth were present. Lyra sat to one side, her markings carefully neutral, but her eyes full of worry. The Emperor spoke for the first time. The third trial tests sacrifice. Captain Morrison, You have shown understanding of our culture and the strength to endure our challenges. But now you must face the hardest question. What are you willing to give up for my daughter? An elder stepped forward, holding a device that glowed with soft blue light. This is genetic modification technology. We can alter your biology to match Velenith physiology. You would live for thousands of years instead of decades. You would gain our telepathic abilities. You would become, in essence, one of us. Princess Lyra would not have to watch you age and die within a single lifetime. Jake looked at the device, then at Lyra. She was watching him carefully, her markings shifting between violet and yellow. Or, the Emperor continued, you can remain as you are, fully human. But if you choose this, you condemn my daughter to love someone who will die almost immediately. By our standards, she will have decades with you, then thousands of years of grief. The trial, the elder explained, is whether you will sacrifice your humanity for love or sacrifice your love to remain human. There is no wrong answer, only the truth of your heart. Jake stood silent for a long moment. He thought about living for thousands of years, about having all that time with Lyra. It was tempting, so tempting, but it wasn't him. It wasn't who he was. I choose to remain human, Jake said clearly. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Even Zeth looked shocked. Lyra's markings flared bright violet, tears running down her silver face. You would refuse immortality? The Emperor asked. Yes. Because if I accept your modification, I stop being the person Lyra fell in love with. She didn't fall for a Velenith in human skin. She fell for a human, with all the flaws and limitations that comes with. My limited lifespan is part of what makes me who I am. It's what gives every moment meaning. Jake looked directly at the Emperor. You asked what I'm willing to sacrifice. I'm willing to sacrifice the easy path. I'm willing to accept that our time together will be short, because I'd rather have 70 years of being truly myself with Lyra than 1,000 years of being something I'm not. The chamber was silent. Then one of the elders began to glow bright blue, a sign of approval. Another joined, then another, until all the elders were glowing. You have passed the trial of intent, the head elder announced. You chose authenticity over convenience, truth over comfort. This is the heart of what we value. You are worthy of our princess. The Emperor's markings were conflicted, shifting between red and blue. Finally, he stood and approached Jake. I am not pleased with this situation. I still believe it is a mistake, but our laws are clear, and you have honored those laws. My daughter may choose you, if she wishes. Lyra rushed forward, no longer bound by protocol. She threw her arms around Jake, her markings blazing so bright that the entire chamber glowed violet. You did it. You actually did it. Did you doubt me? Jake asked, holding her close. Never. Not for a moment. She pulled back to look at him, her dark eyes full of joy. 70 years will not be enough. But I will treasure every second. So will I. The Emperor cleared his throat. There must be conditions. You cannot simply run off together. Princess Lyra, you will no longer be heir to the throne. Your sister will take that position. I accept, Lyra said without hesitation, and you both will serve as ambassadors between our peoples. You will help humans and Velenith understand each other. Your unusual bond will be a bridge between our civilizations. We accept, Jake and Lyra said together. 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of a new space station, built jointly by Earth and the Velenith Empire. Ships from dozens of species came and went, a symbol of cooperation and understanding. Lyra stood beside him, her hand in his. Her markings glowed soft gold, the color of contentment and peace. She wore simpler robes now, having left behind much of the royal formality. Jake wore a uniform with patches from both Earth and Velenith, symbol of his dual role. Lisa approached with a data pad. Message from the Coalition. They want you two to lead a new rapid response team. Mixed species. Designed to handle crises like the attack on Zenith Prime. What do you think? Jake asked Lyra. I think it sounds perfect. We fought for the right to choose our own path. Now let us choose to help others. Her markings pulsed brighter. Together, together. Jake agreed. He looked out at the stars, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. From that moment in the Grand Hall, when a princess's markings had flared violet, to trials that had tested everything he was, to this moment of peace and possibility. They had faced opposition from both their peoples. They had fought against tradition and expectation. They had chosen a difficult path when easier ones were available. But as Jake looked at Lyra, seeing the joy in her eyes and the love in her glowing markings, he knew it had all been worth it. Every challenge, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt. The galaxy was changing. Humans were finding their place among the stars. And at the heart of that change was a love story that had begun with a single instant of recognition and grown into something that would bridge worlds. Lyra squeezed his hand. What are you thinking about? The future, Jake said. Our future. Tell me. I'm thinking about all the days ahead. About the work we'll do together. The challenges we'll face. The life we'll build. I'm thinking that 70 years suddenly feels like both forever and not nearly enough time. Then, we will make every day count. Lyra's markings glowed brighter. That is what you taught me, Jake Morrison. That every moment matters. That love means choosing to be fully present, fully alive, for whatever time we have. A chime sounded, indicating an incoming ship. Their first assignment was about to begin. A diplomatic crisis on a border world that needed mediators who understood both human and alien perspectives. Jake and Lyra headed toward the docking bay, ready to face whatever came next. Behind them, Lisa smiled and shook her head. Against all odds, the soldier and the princess had found their happy ending, and it was just the beginning.